Disclaimer: Jammu Kashmir TV is a voice of voiceless, believing in complete freedom of expression, however, making it clear that as we institute are not responsible for conversation or words used in any of the shows.
Right, Waseem, welcome to Diaspora Voices. What we try and do on this program is listen to the voices of people from within the Kashmiri community, first generation, second, third, whatever generation of people who are away from Azad Kashmir and have a story to tell, and yours is an interesting story. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you, welcome you to the program, and for your time and for willing to share. So just introduce yourself.
Karamat, first and foremost, thank you for having me on this program. I've watched some of the programs. I take an interest in the work that you do, both on this program and others, and it's a privilege for me to be joining you. So I'm Waseem Zaffar. I'm a British Kashmiri, born and brought up in Birmingham, in the Lazals and Handsworth areas of Birmingham, where I've lived all my life. My father came from Azad Kashmir, the Dadial area of Azad Kashmir. As a young lad, he was probably in his early teens, if that, to join his elder brothers here. My mum followed in the late 70s, very late 70s, after she married my father, her husband, and we've lived in Birmingham, and in particular this area of Birmingham, all our life. In fact, I'm sat here in this house. I moved here 3 years ago, originally from just from around the corner on the Leonard Road. So very much a local boy who's really well connected to this area of Birmingham. I was privileged enough in 2011 to be elected a councillor to represent the area at Birmingham City Council, and have held a number of posts and positions of responsibility on the council since then. But yeah, that's a very brief introduction to who I am.
Yeah, so from what you say and from what little I know of you and your family, your father sounds like the first of the what would be post-war migration phase, and what do you know about his migration story? How he got here?
So my father's elder brothers, 3 elder brothers were here: Jumshed Khan, Raja Khan, and Taj Khan, and he came along to join them. And my other uncle often refers to dropping him off in Islamabad for him to go to Karachi, and via Karachi to come to come to the UK. And there was always that big risk that these young boys could get lost in Karachi. So they were never sure that they were going to reach their desired destination. But he came here, as I said, as a relatively young, 11, 12 years of age, and went to school, did a little bit of school, but then got involved and worked with his elder brothers in the family businesses, and then later started to do other work. So it's a typical story. The story of my father is a story of thousands of other migrants from South Asia, particularly from the Kashmir area.
But you were born here in Birmingham in the early 80s, educated here, you live here, you work here, you're a politician here, as a Kashmiri. What does that mean for your identity?
So as I said, I was in 1981. I was born in Birmingham, and I'm the eldest of my siblings. I've got 4 younger sisters, and I think from a very, very early age, I've had a strong sense of connection to my family's roots. I visited Kashmir from a very, very early age, and was got really well connected with people there and with the place from an early age. And I now talk about my multiple identities. My multiple identities being I'm British. I'm incredibly proud to be British. I'm incredibly proud to be English. I'm the proudest Brummie there is. This city has given me and my family so much, and I'm really well connected to the city. I understand the Birmingham story. I've done some amazing work as a public servant in this city too. I'm equally proud to be a practicing Muslim. Faith is really important to me. And I'm equally proud of my origin, my Kashmiri origin. And I spend a lot of time learning about my family's journey from poverty, from very difficult times in our village in Thob Jagir in Dadial to where we are today. So it was, real humble beginnings, real tough times. My father, as a child, worked away, anything and everything just to put, along with his other siblings and other family members to earn to eat. And I will never ever forget the sacrifices and the struggles that they faced to enable us to today live in much better circumstances. So it's all I'm very, very comfortable with my multiple identities, and I think that makes me a stronger person. Understanding who I am, and I never shy away from the fact that I am of Kashmiri origin. In fact, I speak about it very, very proudly. I also talk about the struggles of the people of Kashmir, the challenges of the Kashmir issue, and that is part of my politics. In fact, that's more important than my politics here, because that is something where my sort of grounding in community activism was formed on the issue of Kashmir, and I still work every day of the week in trying to help my brothers and sisters who are suffering across the other side of the world. So, yeah, I feel a real strong sense of connection with where I live today, where my family came from, and where we're going. And my friend, Professor Carl Chin, who's a major historian in Birmingham, he often talks about you can't move forward without understanding your past. And I feel really comfortable that I've learned about my past. I've learned about my family. I've learned about the roots, and I've still got a lot more to learn. And I'm looking forward to next week where I'll be, inshallah, in Kashmir, learning more about my family's history.
Yeah, I mean, I'm first generation Kashmiri, and obviously born over there, and living most of my childhood there. For our generation, I think it was a help. It laid the foundation. But I'm fascinated with your generation, who are born here, and I know you are fluent in Mirpuri Pahari, and you're confident in your identity. I'm fascinated how that comes to be the way it is. Just help me to understand how you come to have your identity, your Kashmiri identity, your Birmingham identity. Who has helped you to explore and develop that identity? Was it family, school, university, community? How do we get here with this identity of yours?
So my strong sense of connection to my Kashmiri roots is largely down to my family, to my immediate family, to my extended family, and to the people of my ancestral village. And I do accept that I'm a little unique. When I sometimes start speaking in Mirpuri Bahari, people ask me when did I come over. That's how fluent I am, and that's because that's how I communicated with my mom, particularly my mom. My father could speak a bit of English before he passed away. My mom understands some English, but the main way to communicate was in the mother tongue. But I think the real, when I used to go back to Kashmir, I had a lot of love from both my mom's side and my dad's side, my nani and my dadi in particular. And my dad's elder brother, my Taya, he was the Raja Kamal. He was somebody who I automatically connected to. And there was a Chacha who unfortunately was murdered many, many years ago. I was really close to them. And these people, they offered me a lot of love, a lot of affection. And through them, I was also able to see the beauty of my, my ancestral village, my ancestral areas, and started to develop a friends network there too. So when I got all that love and affection, I wanted to go back there again and again. I remember as an 8-year-old, I went over for my auntie's wedding, and my dad came back, and I wanted to stay an extra month. And so it was a real strong sense of connection. I remember it was only a few years ago. I said to my mum that I've now finished off paying my student loan that you take out at university to use on student fees and everything else. And she said to me, "Do you know what you spent most of your student loan on?" And I said, "I couldn't remember." And she said, "You spent most of your student loan and actually building the house that we've now got in Kashmir. Like my dad was building it, but I was contributing to it." And I remember now, back then in 2000, when we started building that and completed in 2003, I actually went across there. I think I was probably 18, 19. And I, worked on designing it, where I wanted it in the village and everything else. So it's right from a very, very early age, I was really well connected. And today, alhamdulillah, I have a very strong friends network. I have a very strong family network. I look forward to going back there. I look forward to taking my children there and my family there. So it's because, and when I'm there, I'm not, I some of my friends go across there and they behave in a manner which they find difficult to integrate into life there. And I very quickly integrate. I start playing the games that they play. I'll sit on the edge of a field and play cards with some of the elders of the village, sitting on stones or crates or whatever there is. And so some of those are my dad's friends. And when I start to play with them, they feel that pride in me. And it's a very, very, you have your village politics, you have your family politics, we all do, but there's such a lovely atmosphere across there in a very green U-shaped valley village of ours, which I love it. I love village life there. And I said this, I was on a visit there a couple of years ago. I was part of a visit with the Lord Mayor of Birmingham, the then Lord Mayor of Birmingham, and I landed in Islamabad, overnight flight. I can never sleep on flights. I got in the car and I was with somebody. I said, "Let me drive." Even though I was tired, I started driving. And when we passed, I was absolutely tired. But when we passed the famous Dangali Bridge, which is a connection from the Punjab to Azad Kashmir, from Patwar into Dadial, I just felt this energy in me, and all my tiredness and feeling lazy and sleepy disappeared, and I felt I'd reached my motherland. And I was at an event. I had to make a public speak, and I told him the story. I said, "Look, this is who I am, and I'm just really excited to be here. And despite the fact I've not probably slept for the last 36 hours, I'm here. And I can't wait for the next 2.5 miles to get back into my village and meet my people." And that's, and I know, it is quite unique, but I'm speaking to you with a sense of excitement because I'm going in the next few days.
Yes,
And I'm
yes,
really looking forward to it. So
yes.
it is important to me. And I, it's who I am. It's where my roots are. It's where my dad came from, my grandparents came from, my forefathers came from, and I can never forget that. I can never forget who they are. And
Yes.
It's very much, I feel very home here in Birmingham,
Yes.
but I also feel at home when I'm in Kashmir.
Yes, 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 yes. You're now a parent of 3 boys. Are you taking active steps, conscious steps, to help them stay connected with their Birmingham and Kashmiri heritages?
Yeah, absolutely. My sons are 9, 5, and 2, and the 9 and the 5-year-olds have been to. They've been to Kashmir. Both of them were at my family wedding a few years ago, and in next week I'll be taking them with me because I want them, and they love the city. My 9-year-old is probably the biggest Villa fan there is. He's a huge
Yes,
fan of
yes, yes.
Villa Football Club. We're both season ticket holders. We have to do everything, including our holidays abroad, in line with Aston Villa fixtures and everything else. But so he's really well connected. He understands what Birmingham is and the importance of the local football team, and they go to school here. And it's in a way, I'm taking active steps, and I encourage other parents to take active steps to introduce our children to their history. I want my children to be as well connected with their multiple identity as I am. But that doesn't happen naturally. The story I've told, I didn't suddenly fall in love with my Kashmiri origins. I was there. I got a lot of love and a lot of affection and a lot of teaching and learning of my family, my friends, and my villagers. And I want to create those opportunities for my children too, because I think they'll be stronger and better people if they do understand the journey of how their family came here and they speak about it. They're fluent enough, and because they're knowledgeable enough to talk about their family's journey. I think that it makes I think it makes me a better person, makes me a stronger person, gives me great opportunities, and I hope the same is for them. But I can't sit back. I often holiday in Turkey, I holiday in Morocco and Dubai, and my children love that. They want to go there, but I want them to say to me, and I said, I was talking to a friend a couple of days ago, and I said I'm taking them, over the summer holidays to Pakistan and Kashmir. But where I want to get to is in next year they say to me, Dad, let's go back there, and I want them to want to go back. But the only way they want to go back is if they enjoy their trip this time.
Yes,
if I take them and I sit them down in 40 degrees heat in the middle of a village and do nothing for 4 weeks, I don't think they'll want to go back. But if we've got the facilities and today, then we can take them to other areas. We can show them what the beauty of Kashmir. We can take them to Islamabad, Lahore, and Murree and other places. They will want to go back. Why wouldn't they want to go back? So those are the active steps I'm taking. I'm learning off really my father and my mother and what they did with me. And I don't think it was intentional, but it was important. And I want them to meet my family there as well.
I think some of what you're talking about is kind of happenstance, coincidence, unique to your situation. But many of the things you talk about, I'm also interested in those things happening for other people, for other children growing up from our community. You said that your identity kind of was born and developed in the family, in the Kashmiri community. But I'm in education, been in education for a long time. I wonder sometimes, what role is there for education, for schools? You went through, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years of education yourself. Your children are going through. What role is there for schools, colleges, universities, adult education, youth services in Birmingham and places like Birmingham to work on children's identities, not just one identity, but multiple identities? So you obviously have been through the school system. I don't know what you remember, what you learned, what the school system did for you, what the university did for you, but you're a parent, with certain priorities. You want your children to be brought up with a particular sense of identities. What are your expectations of the school system here in Birmingham in such matters? What should they be doing? What should the teachers be doing? So your sons were in school this year, and they will be at school in September. So when the school the teacher says to your children, your son, your eldest. So tell me what you did in the summer. And he said, oh, I went to Kashmir. Will the teacher be able to connect with that conversation? Will the teacher have the ability to connect with that conversation and really engage and enter the space your son is referring to?
You ask a really important question, and I often talk about some of the challenges about disaffected young people, radicalization, and some of the other challenges we've had over the years in our community, nails down to people being uncomfortable with their identities, and particularly those people who've got multiple identities. I think the first thing that we need to do more of is understand the history of where we live. I at school learned more about World War One, Two, Hastings, and historical wars than I did around the history of my neighborhood, which is sad. And the history of my neighborhood is amazing. The Industrial Revolution was started in Handsworth and Lascelles, and I've done a lot of work with friends around the history of our community. You know, who walked the streets of Lascelles and Handsworth many years ago, 100 years ago, compared, in comparison to who walks, what sort of communities live here today. And we've learned a lot. We've learned some fascinating facts about the history of our neighborhood. I also founded the Birmingham Heritage Week, and that was largely around celebrating the Birmingham story, the history of our city, how communities have come, gone, and stayed in this neighborhood, in this city, in this amazing city of 170 different nationalities amongst 1.1 million people. It's quite unique. It's a melting pot of multiculturalism. And let's get people talking about those journeys. Let's get people talking about the history of those communities when the first generation Kashmiris or the Siletis or the Yemenis came here, or those that came on through the Windrush generation, those that came from the Punjab, whether it's Pakistan or India. Let's capture those stories because they're amazing stories, and let's get people talking about them. And then I think it's really important that people utilize those stories around those first generation migrants to start to understand why our forefathers came here, the journey they took, the decision they took, how they started to help rebuild this country particularly after the Second World War, and then today are playing their children and their children's children are playing leading roles in all walks of life. So I think there's a real issue around and a challenge to schools, and schools are really busy. They've got huge challenges, not enough resources. But I think if we want to make our children stronger adults moving forward, we need to do work around helping them explore who they are as people. And that is both, exploring where they currently live, where they were born, but also the journeys of their communities. And coming back to my story, I remember going to school, coming back from school, going to madrasa to learn about Islam, and then also going after that to Urdu classes with a gentleman, Master Raja Hamid Saab, who's a relative of ours. Master Saab used to have at times 70, 80 children, and we'd be reading and speaking and writing Urdu. And along that, you start to learn not just the language, but about the culture as well. So it was challenging, if you think about it. A 9-10-year-old boy going to school, then going to Islamic studies, then going to Urdu, and before you know it, when you get home, in the winter it's already dark once you finish your studies. So there's a lot of work, but I think that it does. We are now seeing the fruit of those decisions from our parents. But again, the other final thing I'll say on this question is, there's an important role for schools and other education establishments, formal and informal. But the most important role is the family. What happens in the house? I remember, and I know you've written an amazing book around this, but I remember the tapes, the tape stories. I remember sitting around a room with my mum and my sisters and listening to my grandmothers record tapes and send over the tapes, and then we'd finish listening to them, and then we'd start to record over them back the responses, and everyone would be expected to speak and say hello. This was before WhatsApp was in existence, and telephoning was cheap because it cost you an arm and a leg back in those days to make a call to Pakistan. So hours and hours of tapes were those tape letters were sent. I also remember people in my extended family coming to my mum and asking her to write letters to their relatives. There's this blue uh, airmail sort of
Yes.
envelope. It was an envelope and a thing you could write on. And my
Mm.
mum would write for them because she was very fluent at writing.
Mm.
So she'd write for them, and then they'd come back a few weeks later when they had the response and ask my mum to read it, because many of the community were illiterate in Urdu, but that's how they'd communicate. And I think there was those. It was just so the whole cultural understanding.
Yes. Yes.
There's a lot of work around food that takes place, and food is important, but just having that cultural upbringing where you can freely and fondly talk about different cultures and upbringings. And I think
Yes.
educating your children through that is important too. I love the way my children communicate with my mum. They speak in English. Mum responds in Mirpuri. Both of them understand each other. And now my boys, they're starting to speak a bit of Mirpuri, and it's so funny the way they speak it, because they get the genders wrong. They're on a learning curve.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
this is part of the learning, and hopefully one day they'll be able to speak fluent Mirpuri. And if they do, it's all down to their grandmother, my mother, because
Yes.
that's how they communicate. So I think there's a lot of learning at home that takes place, and I think it's important for us. The conversation I'm having with you, many people ask, why is it important for the British Kashmiri community who are living here, well established here, breaking through glass ceilings, achieving so much? Why is it important that they do have that cultural sense of understanding? It's because it makes us stronger people. Having a strong understanding, I think, adds opportunities, and it makes us, gives us something extra to add to the many dimensions that we already have.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Let's talk about your political role. You mentioned you're a cabinet member.
Was a cabinet member.
Was okay. But you all the time I've known of you, known you. You've been active in Birmingham politics, and in various roles. And how did all that get started?
So it was whilst I was at college and more at university, I started to get involved as a volunteer coaching cricket and football. I loved my cricket. I played decent cricket as a young man, and I was always fond of football, always fond of Aston Villa Football Club, and then went on to work as a sort of a sessional youth worker for the council, predominantly cricket and football coaching. And then from there, got to know some of the local politicians, and got my sort of casual community work became more formal community work. And I started, when I left university, there was a full-time role for me waiting in an organization, third sector organization that I'd set up. And I'd always been politically active. And I remember leafleting for the Labour Party at the age of 8 years of age, because my father's friend Saeed Abdi, a Yemeni councillor, lived up right opposite us, and he'd give me leaflets to deliver. He'd call me Gaffer. I'd deliver these leaflets, and in exchange I'd get a sticker and some balloons and stuff. So I joined the Labour Party at the age of 15. I was recruited by members of my family. I also became very active on the Kashmir issue and with Kashmiri politics too. I have a strong friends network who are involved in Kashmiri politics, both in Kashmir and here. And then one thing led to another. In 2011, I was selected by the Labour Party to stand as a candidate in what was then the Lazars and East Handsworth ward. It was a big award than I've got now. We have 3 councillors for that award. And for the last 13 years, I've had the privilege and honour to serve on Birmingham City Council. And during that time, I've held some very important roles. I've been cabinet member for transport and environment for 4 years. I've been cabinet member for equalities for a year. I've been chairs of the scrutiny committee for 4 years. I've led on some very interesting, important, controversial projects such as the Clean Air Zone and many major highway and environmental changes to Birmingham. So it's been a huge privilege to have such an important role in Birmingham politics for the last 13 years. And I wake up every morning really eager to make changes because we live in one of the most unequal cities in this country,
Yes.
for deprivation and inequalities. I represent the third most deprived neighborhood in the city.
Mm, mm.
And I'll just give you one inequality fact that really makes me angry, and that is that if you live in Handsworth or Lozells, you're likely to live 9 years less than if you live in Leafy, Sutton Coldfield,
Okay.
3 miles away. So just
Yes.
across 3 miles of traveling in this city, you lose or gain depending which way you travel 9 years
Yes.
of
Yes.
life. That level of disparity, that level of inequality, that level of inequity is something that we have to address. And now that we've got a Labour government, and a Labour mayor, and a Labour council, I hope that we can start to see the right levels of investment and policies brought forward nationally, regionally, and locally that can start to address some of those huge
Mm, mm,
inequalities and deprivation that's been in existence for a long time.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I think you'll be familiar with one of my books was called Dear Birmingham, where I try to draw attention to the Pakistani Kashmiri community, many of whom live in the kind of wards you're talking about, where they're disadvantaged by social class, race, ethnicity, religion, but also where they happen to be living. They miss out on the green spaces. They their area is usually generally more polluted, and probably less clean air. I think some of these areas need positive action. They need more. They don't need equality. They need more resources because of their disadvantage. They need compensatory steps being taken. Can you relate to what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. I talk about equity a lot. I talk about
Yes.
equity more
Okay.
than
Okay.
equality. And look, in Lozells, during the pandemic, particularly in the first phase, I would wake up every morning knowing that somebody's died from within our neighborhood. With the most densely populated neighborhood that is in Birmingham, most of the employment that we've got is very hand to mouth. Taxi workers, people working in takeaways and restaurants, people working in shops. They don't have the luxury of sick leave. They don't have the luxury of working in places where they get 28 days annual leave or stuff like that. It's very hand to mouth, the gig economy as we call it. And we also had 3-4 generations living in one house, one bathroom, and we saw that disparity. And I called out some of the health services and said, it's your fault because of the lack of investment that I've historically had in my community, particularly around primary care services, which has made my community less resilient to take on the battles that the pandemic provided. And when you've got children going to school, grandparents and people working all sharing the same bathroom, because of the huge challenges around housing and the housing inequalities, you were gonna get this disease transmit between people. You couldn't stop it. So that's just one example, but I see examples, and I have families coming to me on my advice surgery where there's husband, wife, and 4 kids living in 1 and 2 bedroom flats.
Yeah.
That's unacceptable. I would never want my family to grow up in those circumstances and live in those circumstances. So why do my constituents have to live in those circumstances? Youth unemployment in Lozells has been the highest since I was born. Why? What's going on? We've got to, so I think you're absolutely right. We have to look at investing into people, investing into our communities. And I hope that in the coming years, we will start to see that investment, because public services in this country and in this city are totally broken. And they need investment, they need rebuilding. And I hope when they're rebuilt taking into consideration that we have communities that really need support. And, in work poverty is a real challenge. The cost of living crisis, there's huge, on Tuesday mornings, a local church on Lozells Road runs a soup kitchen. And what I've seen over the years, I remember launching that 10 years ago. And I thought, first of all, we shouldn't have this. Then secondly, I thought hopefully this won't be around for long. It's still there. I was at their 10th anniversary the other day. And the other challenge is their queue was very small at the start. The queues wrap around half of Lozells Road right now. Why is that? and then, you know, it's a very, very sad state of affairs in our city, in our neighborhoods, in our country, and we have to fix it. And I'm not, I always, when you point fingers at others, you also look at what you are doing. And I am an elected representative. I have been given a mandate by my constituents on 4 occasions, and they expect me to be part of raising my voice, support, advocating on their behalf to bring about the changes that are required. And I feel people like me need to do a lot more to tackle these issues, because these are people's lives that we're at stake. So, yeah, to answer your question, I totally agree with what you're saying. We need some real.
I mean, I was asked to comment on Rishi Sunak, the fact that we as a nation had our first Asian prime minister. And one of the things I said was, I still think, and many people in the world and many people in our country still think, that we are a first world nation. We're a wealthy nation. And why have we got people who are going hungry? And why are we having people who are queuing to be given soup in a kitchen on a Sunday from a church? Are we a poor country? And it's quite shameful what's going on in our neighborhoods and our city and nation. So, like you, I have high expectations of the new government. You talked about health. I've obviously been focused on education, and I think in Dear Birmingham, my book, I did talk about health, but recently Birmingham has produced health profiles of different communities, and I would say one of the worst, probably the worst health profile is of the Pakistani Kashmiri community in Birmingham. Levels of obesity, diabetes, heart condition, death rate, you name it, it's there. And with 17% of the city being Pakistani Kashmiri heritage and growing every year, I think nothing short of a Pakistani specific health strategy is needed in places like Birmingham, and certainly in response to the health profile. So yes, there is much work to do.
Just on that, I served for 8 years as a non-executive director on a hospital trust, Sandwell West Birmingham NHS Trust. So I saw some of the health challenges very, very close up, and obviously public health is now sat at the local authority too. I'm a type 2 diabetic. I've been a diabetic since the early 20s. My mom's a diabetic. My late father was a diabetic. If you go to East Birmingham, where you got large pockets of Kashmiri and Pakistani communities, every second house you'll come across somebody who's a diabetic. And this is diabetes is a lot around what we eat. Obviously, there's an inheritance aspect too, but there's a lot with what we eat, our lifestyles, levels of stress, and everything else. So I think there's a lot of work to do around curing diabetes, but I think there's a lot of work around preventing diabetes. And I think certainly the South Asian community, which is more where you're more prevalent to have illnesses such as diabetes, there's a lot of work we can do around awareness raising campaigns, a more balanced diet, ensuring that we got people going for little walks and getting some steps in and having the right level of exercise. And our diet is, for many families, is still the diet that there was a Kashmiri diet 3-4 generations ago, or probably longer. And back then, you were in Kashmir, you'd go and work in the fields, you'd work hard, you'd work hard in good weather, warm weather, hot weather. You'll sweat off a lot, so you could have 2 prantas with some lassi and saag in the morning, and go and do that, because you can easily sweat it off.
Yes, burn it off.
But whereas now if you're having two parathe, lassi and saag, or even makkani roti, which is my mom's favorite,
Yeah.
you're then going to struggle to if you sat at a desk working away, or if
Yeah.
you're lying down in front of the telly, you're going to
Yes.
struggle to burn that off. So I
Yes.
think we need to look at just, I'm not saying stop eating parathe and saag, but I'm just saying that we just need to understand that we've got to have a more balanced diet. We've got a very carbohydrate heavy diet. I remember going on a carb-free diet myself, and it's very, very difficult because whichever house you go to, they either serve you chapatis or rice, or and these are very carb heavy diets. So
Yes. Yes.
I think, and I'm, we need some. It's very simple interventions, not very difficult. We just need some awareness raising and some
Yes.
specific
Yes.
focus on the challenges that exist within communities. But up until now, there has been some good examples of this work, but we need a stronger and more resources put into these sort of campaigns.
Yes. 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 But that starts with an acceptance that actually broad brush approaches don't work, and communities live their lives according to their culture, their heritage, their particular ways, and that has to be the where you start to influence people, work with people, develop strategies that are particular to particular communities on health, education, just a range of services in the Birmingham community. Going back to your particular focus, one of the things I know you've done is you're a founder member of the Clean Air Justice Network. What does that network aim to achieve?
So before I talk about the network, I need to talk to you about my clean air journey, which is a very controversial.
Okay. Yes.
That's quite an unpopular journey that I took. So when I was appointed cabinet member for transport and environment, one of the challenges in front of me was introducing the clean air zone in Birmingham. And obviously it was a very, very difficult policy. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. And I really started to learn more about it. And I started to realize how air pollution impacts on communities disproportionately. And the biggest impact of air pollution in urban places such as Birmingham is on the poorest, on white working class communities, and also black and ethnic minority communities. Yet we've got to get to legal, and we were operating at illegal levels of air pollution according to what legislation in this country and in Europe indicates. So we had to introduce the clean air zone. I had massive opposition from our taxi community, who I still meet, who are still not happy with it. But we've reduced air pollution in our city. We've improved the air quality, and ultimately, when you improve air quality, you make dents to the unfortunate stat that 1,000 people in our city die prematurely every year because of air pollution, and thousands of people, particularly young children, they gain illnesses such as asthma because of air pollution. So when I left the cabinet in May 22, I spoke to some like-minded friends and said, this is a very, very important piece of work. Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, has not just driven this agenda in London, but he's been an international leader working on tackling air pollution and the impacts of air pollution. So I spoke to people that work very closely with him, and we decided to set up something called the Clean Air Justice Network. And in fact, this morning, I've been meeting with partners to set up the Birmingham Healthy Air Coalition, which is a network that will link into the national sort of structure. And it brings people together to talk about the challenges around air pollution, what interventions we need to make, what education and awareness we need to create, how we use some of the research that universities and other academic partners have gathered, and ultimately create a safer environment so our children and our children's children in years to come can breathe cleaner air, and less of them suffer with asthma and other illnesses, diabetes, dementia, strokes, all sorts of heart illnesses. They're all linked to air pollution, and we want people to live longer, better quality lives. And tackling the challenges around air pollution would definitely help that.
Yeah, good. In terms of politics, I got quite excited. I think a couple of years ago, maybe last year, you came within a couple of votes to close to leading and becoming leader of the council, leader of the Labour Party. You're obviously a local politician, but have you, considered becoming a national politician, becoming an MP?
So mom, I get asked this question all the time, and first of all, just on the leadership, I put forward myself to lead the Labour Party in Birmingham, and it was a huge step to take. Birmingham's had in its entire history leaders from the white community. There was never been a non-white person to lead Birmingham, and I was very humble with the support that I got. I came within 2 votes of winning the election. But it's politics, you win some, you lose some, and so it was a very interesting period of my life.
Yes.
And I'm very privileged to be the councillor for Lascelles. I've got a mandate until May 26. I'll continue to work hard every day of the week for the residents of Lascelles. In terms of national politics, I've got a lot of friends who are members of Parliament. I've got a lot of friends who've just been elected, and some of them re-elected back to Parliament. They have very, very important roles to play. And I'm like I said, I'm really, really focused on doing the best for the community in Lascelles at this moment of time. And you never rule anything out, but my children are relatively young. I know if you're a member of Parliament, you're literally living out of a suitcase between your constituency and between Parliament. It's not an easy lifestyle, but so at this moment in time, there's no plans for national politics. It's all about serving the people at Lascelles.
Yes. No, that's that it's good to hear that for now. But I think you're young enough, and there's plenty of time ahead, hopefully, for you to go on making an impact. You wrote something very interesting, I thought, a little while ago. You were talking about in a blog. It went along the lines of Labour is right to embrace the Union Jack. It isn't the property of the far right. I remember there was probably a question time with Robin Day or a program like that, and I remember Claire Short MP, who used to represent Ladywood, saying the same thing many years ago. So yes, there are some interesting issues on the national political scene that need to be considered, and I think we just had a change of government. There are many of these issues. I'm sure they're exploring, and certainly, in relation to you, you'll be familiar with the Birmingham Race Impact Group that I'm active in, and in that organization, we talk about passing the baton to the next generation, and that's usually in a 4x4 race, and usually it takes more than one person who is competent. So it's not just a question of passing the baton to somebody, but actually somebody needs to be there who's competent to grab the baton and run with it. And I'm your father's generation, so first generation post-war migrant from our community, and I've settled in Birmingham 54 years, and it gives me a lot of hope when I meet you, because I walk away and thinking, when my time comes to pass the baton, there is at least one competent person to hand it over to. So thank you for what you do and what you've done and what you will do, no doubt, in the future.
Just to thank you for those kind words. Just on the flag first, and then I'll come to your latter points.
Yeah.
I think too often the British flag is associated with far right extremists. I've talked to you about very proudly and very fondly talked to you about how well connected I am to my roots, but I'm very patriotic. I'm a very patriotic British and an Englishman too. I love this country. And this is my country, and this is where I was born. This was brought up. This is where me and my family's future lies. I've been a victim of some real far right abuse. You know, I had some of the biggest far right leaders, including Tommy Robinson, Paul Goulding, Jada Francis is a bit of a revert now. She's left the far right, and I started to understand more about communities. But literally had a van, a minibus full of thugs land not outside my office, not outside the council house, but in my personal family home. And they came to attack me because I've always been at the face of opposition to far right activity in my city, because I will not let them divide our communities on their agenda. And they left a British flag. They left a British flag in my garden. Okay. I've kept that British flag because that flag doesn't belong to them. It belongs to people like me, you, and other Brits who are proud of British values, who are proud of the freedom of speech and the equality and freedom that we get in this great country, and the rule of law in this country. So I think when Keir Starmer and the Labour Party decided to use the British flag and put it on their membership card of the party and put it on all the communication, the formal communication the party was putting out, that was basically telling those people who seek to divide our communities that we're no longer going to allow that, and we're going to unite behind the British flag because it's our flag. So I absolutely support that. There were some comments that the British flag might offend ethnic minority communities. Absolutely not. That we feel proud, and there was surveys done actually, and of who feels more patriotic, and surveys quite clearly convey that ethnic minorities are more patriotic in this country than actually communities that have been here for generations and generations. So that's important. The point you make about passing the baton on, look, our forefathers came to this country with nothing. They faced racism. They faced huge challenges. They worked hard, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, living in some of the worst conditions. 20 people sharing one house was not uncommon. No access to halal food. No real family networks. No real friends networks. And look at the community today. The reason the community is in such large numbers, thriving. We've just had Shamana Mahmood appointed the Justice Secretary. We've had Kashmiri members of Parliament. We've got Kashmiri doctors, Kashmiri lawyers. We've got Kashmiri academics. That is all down to our forefathers. So 99% of the credit needs to go to them, and their sacrifices and how they struggled but broke through glass ceilings for us to then stand on their shoulders and succeed. So we can never ever dismiss or forget their contributions. But you're absolutely right. The same way they passed the baton on, we have to pass the baton on to the next generation, and we're really bad at doing that as a community. Really bad at passing batons on. I see my role as, and I'm really proud that I've helped some councillors develop political careers. I go and work in schools. I go and work in colleges and youth centres, because a real important part of who I am is developing the next generations of leaders who are going to achieve more than me, who are going to be better than me. I will step aside as the councillor for Lizelles the day I meet the person who's going to do a better job than me. That could be tomorrow morning. That could be in 2 years' time. That could be in 4 years' time. And I want to have played a role in developing that person, because then I can sit back and say my legacy is this person's gone on to achieve good. And people, leaders shouldn't feel insecure when people are better than them, and they come through. We need to step aside and let people grow. So passing the baton on, leaving a legacy, developing the next generation of leaders, helping people break through glass ceilings. This is all part of who I am, and why other leaders need to also adopt this sort of strategy.
Yes.
I often use the phrase that I'm passing through the council chamber. And I am. All politicians are passing through the council chamber. We've had some great local government leaders pass through Birmingham Chamber, the likes of Chamberlain and others, Neville Bosworth, Dick Knowles, Albert Bohr, huge names. And these people, Albert's still there, but others aren't. People go on and move on. Some of them have passed away. Some of them are retired. I will not be in that chamber all the time. I'm passing through. So it's how we can develop the next generation of leaders. And that unfortunately doesn't happen naturally. In some privileged communities it does, but what we have to do in some of the communities that we work in is we've got to help people. We've got to raise aspirations. We've got to put positive role models in front of these people and help them want to achieve this and want to break through glass ceilings. And one of the things I do often, and I've just finished this project, is I take children from my local schools into the council chamber. Because as a 10-year-old, I was a pupil of Heathfield School in Lascelles. I went to the council house to meet the then Lord Mayor, Sir Bernard Zisserman. I still remember it. I'm talking about it right now. I want these children to go in there and go into the chamber, make speeches, talk about their communities, talk about democracy, learn about democracy, and that will hopefully one day empower them to go on. You talked about Rishi Sunak. Why can't in 10 years' time the Prime Minister, or 20 years' time the Prime Minister of this country be a young person in a school right now in Lascelles? That's level of aspiration we need to instill into these children.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. You were talking about going to Kashmir, and you mentioned Don Gully, the bridge that divides Pakistan and Kashmir. It kind of momentarily took me back there, because when I remember the old bridge, and as soon as we were on that bridge, we knew we'd left Pakistan and we were in Kashmir, and you'll be going that way. Just remember when you're going through Saraiki, and you're leaving Saraiki, and you're on the bridge from Saraiki to Khurd Pira. Just on the right is the village, my little village. Just wave hello to it as you go past. Give my regards to it, and enjoy your trip, and enjoy time with your family, and keep well, and keep doing what you're doing.
Karamat, thank you for inviting me to share my story, but more importantly, thank you for everything you're doing and you've done for many years. You're an outstanding leader in our community. You do hugely invaluable work. Your research is immense, and people like you are part of the reason we've achieved so much, and we're going to go and achieve more as a community. So thank you.
Thank you for those kind words.